a few volumes, you can see. We also need, as I said, all the legal records of trials and detentions and hearings that have been brought since 9/11. Number of victims' families have tried to take this matter to court. Some have succeeded. People who survived the events and escaped. One woman who crawled out of the Pentagon, took the government to court because she claimed the whole thing was a false flag. There have been heroic individual attempts. Well, all those court hearings need to be gathered from a legal history point of view and brought into one common narrative. We also need the records of all the security firms who were technically responsible for protecting the Twin Towers and Building 7. Who were they? What was their protocols? Where's the checks and balances that they did? Were they such that they might have somehow been enabling people to sneak into the buildings and pre-wire them? And the thing about Building 7 is important because as the new research from the University of Alaska has made clear, it obviously can't have fallen just with accidental fires triggered by debris coming from the main towers. It's a false narrative. And that's called a lie. The facts are the building was pre-wired. There's no doubt about that. And as a historian, I have to sit up and say when facts emerge contrary to an initial hypothesis, you go back to the hypotheses and you generate new hypotheses because it's ruled those ones out. That's what historians do. Then there's the question of evidence given to the Chilcot Commission in London. Sir John Chilcot, who actually is a kind of historian like me, and actually at one point did some work for the Institute of Historical Research in London. He did a fairly good job with the Chilcot Commission, but he took too long. He went into too much unnecessary detail on some of the less important things. And in my opinion, the Commission was stopped from investigating the time span between 9/11 and launch of the war in Iraq. In my view, the Chilcot Commission should have had an extended brief, and I think Gordon Brown was wrong in this, in restricting the Chilcot Commission to look at the functioning of the war and whether we had enough supplies and whether the British Army was properly kitted and who took operational decisions. All that, although it's important, was nowhere near as important as the million-dollar question: why did Britain go to war against Iraq in 2003? And how had the narrative turned from Tony Blair saying 9/11's changed everything, we're going to help America get the people who did it, which was his initial stuff, to let's go and attack Saddam Hussein. There was a narrative that developed, and what Chilcot should have looked at is where that developed in the Foreign Office, which civil servants connived with that, which politicians, which Jack Straws, which media outlets were pushing this. BBC is complicit here hugely. How was the country prepared for let's attack Iraq on the basis of 9/11? So that's and the Chilcot Commission itself needs historically examining. Who wrote its terms of reference, who restricted its protocols, who limited it to not asking the connecting question with 9/11 to Iraq, and who limited it and made it like a failure before it even began. That is all held in by the Privy Council in the UK, because the Commission was set up under the Privy Council, which doesn't operate under freedom of information rules, as I discovered, because I asked those questions of the Privy Council as a historian trying to find out. I was told, sorry, you can't find that out. We're not telling you because it's Privy Council. Well, so as a historian, I'm saying those things need to be released. Privy Council needs to make an exception in this case. All files, archives relating to the setting up of the Chilcot Commission need to be released by the Privy Council into the Historical Commission's hands for analysis. And then there's other weird evidence arising from the mysterious and unexplained deaths of key witnesses and personnel who either were there or saw things or were trailing some leads and researching it all. And there's 10, 20 people that mysteriously died in the years after, immediately and after 9/11. Just normal, good people doing their thing seem to die off, against statistical probabilities. So the circumstances of the deaths of every single one of those people is evidence to come before the Historical Commission into 9/11. Because if they're being murdered, the question is who by. The likelihood is, well, whoever was responsible behind the scenes for 9/11 is also trying to cover it up. As I say, this is a criminal matter. And, historians often do find stuff out that's relevant to law. Like, think of the Nuremberg trials in Germany, when the Holocaust and stuff was gone into and historians gave evidence, which helped prosecute some of those Nazi criminals. And other things like the various war crimes tribunals that have gone on since in European history around Sarajevo and elsewhere. So historians do there's a close link between what the law does and what historians do, but the job of the actual Historical Commission is just to do the history bit. We're not, we're going to find out the truth by hook or by crook, slowly, and then it's up to the law to deal with that. I personally think that the law in America, which would be the main, judicial, locus for any action, I think that the legal protocols in America become so biased towards those people with wealth that they reach the point where they literally think they can get away with murder and do anything they want. So I think there's need for serious legal reform in America, and I hope that some new reforming Democrat type of government in America would look seriously at. Well, it's sort of like legal aid, like the system we have in Britain, whereby poor people can get some kind of justice. And I think that needs strengthening and renewing. I don't think justice is something that you should have to buy, and it's becoming that. Well, that's wrong. Justice should be there for all of us. It's like oxygen or water. It's a human right. And we didn't contract to incarnate on this planet into a world of injustice and a dharma. No, this is a dharmic, universe and a dharmic world. So, anyway, that's that section 3. And now I'm going to reveal section 4, which is the exciting bit, where I come to what possible hypotheses might explain how these buildings collapsed and who did 9/11. Because, you see, the implication is if the buildings were pre-wired, obviously somebody, in addition to whoever's flying the planes, had knowledge of it, expected it, and detonated them in such a way as to make it look as if the planes had brought them down. Well, who? That's the job of the commission, is to find out. And so I then talk about what is a hypothesis in historical studies. It means a sort of an understanding. Hypothesis means something that you place under events, like a causal factor. So, hypothesis 1 is the official narrative of the Bush Commission is largely correct. This was done by 19, Al-Qaeda operatives. Here are the names. They did it in such a way, they, did flight school training, and they hijacked these planes, and they were all under Bin Laden, all sworn oaths of loyalty to him, and the whole thing was an Al-Qaeda Islamic fanatic attack on America, death to America, etc. That's hypothesis 1. Well, I look at it, And as I've said in the second section, I've shown how that hypothesis actually can't be true, doesn't stand up, and I give the details. Hypothesis 2 is that there was inside knowledge and advanced warning that this attack was coming inside the Bush cabinet, and there was collusion between the USA government and Saudi intelligence, which they decided to permit the attack to proceed, and thought it would be very clever to pre-wire the buildings unknown to the hijackers, so they could then put the icing on the cake and make a really big bang. Why? Well, to use it as a launch for an attempt to take over the entire Middle East. Iraq, starting with Iraq and Afghanistan. Hypothesis 3, the wired buildings was done by an inside demolition job using nanothermite. The hypothesis 4, and some of these hypotheses can sort of run together, right? Hypothesis 4 is that these buildings are wired with nanothermite, but it was all done for insurance purposes. It was the owner of the building, Silverstein, that organised this. He knew that there was an attack coming. He thought that if the buildings are wired and we bring it down, well, we've got to bring them down anyway because they all need upgrading and rebuilding. I'll get vast insurance money. America will benefit because they can then launch their wars in Iraq. So everybody's happy. So Silverstein was brought into the secret loop with the CIA and the Bush cabinet. They told him, we want you to bring the buildings down. Look, can we wire them for you? You'll get lots of insurance money. Yes, a few thousand people will die, but hey, we'll win the Middle East and all its oil. You'll get billions of insurance. And what's the problem? A few thousand people will die, So that's a hypothesis. That's hypothesis 4. Another hypothesis, which is Judy Wood's one, is that the buildings are brought down with what she calls directed energy weapons. So, yes, any of the above theories might be true, but actually the instrument was not nanothermite, but some kind of directed energy weapons, which enabled this incredible dustification to take place. Again, do such weapons exist? Well, we don't know about them, but possibly. I mean, there are black ops type research done, paid for from the Pentagon, and equivalents in other countries. For all we know, they do have such things, and they were tested or used at that time. Again, my job is just to generate the hypothesis and suspend judgment, and let these people come before the commission and give their evidence. I've invited Judy Wood to appear before the Historical Commission. We'll see if she turns up. Then I go into some other hypotheses, which has to do with involvement from foreign countries, not just the Bush dynasty cabal, but other people. First hypothesis is role of China. What? Sit up straight, China? It's a hypothesis, right? Now, the following seems to be a fact, which I read in a history of Mossad, that Bin Laden, his movements had been tracked by Mossad agents when he was living in Afghanistan. He'd fled from Sudan, he'd gone to Afghanistan. He was wanted by both American and Israeli intelligence. He was a known anti-Semite, so they had him on their radar. And apparently, he twice went to Beijing on behalf of the Taliban government to do a deal offering money for lots of Chinese weapons. And apparently he was successful. He came back with lots of Chinese weapons, which were flown into or brought into Afghanistan. And the claim is that when the Americans invaded and find the Tora Bora caves, Bin Laden's just gone. There's a little note on the desk saying, sorry, I had to go early. What they found is millions of Chinese weapons in the cave systems. Sophisticated stuff. It wasn't enough to stop the American invasion, but it was significant. Is it possible, this is the hypothesis, that when Bin Laden went to China saying, here's a few billion, dollars, can I have some weapons please, we need them in Afghanistan, that the Chinese said, yeah, okay, go on then, here's the weapons, you can pick them up from this and that warehouse. Bin Laden might have said to the chap running the negotiations, oh, by the way, we're planning an attack on New York. Would you like to be involved? We're going to get the American, capitalist running dogs. And the Chinese might have said, well, that's very interesting. Would you like some nanothermite? We could help you make even more success of it. And they discussed plans. It's possible Chinese intelligence and Bin Laden, sitting down in Beijing, plotted the whole thing. Chinese have a lot of money, and easily they could have bribed the security people in the Twin Towers to lay the charges. No doubt about that. Using frontmen, not sort of Chinese spy-looking people, but mafia types, and could have done it. But it might have all been planned in Beijing, is what I'm saying. It's a hypothesis. The hypothesis then goes on to say, and I give it all in the book, is Blair and Bush actually discovered this, like day one, day two. Our intelligence people discovered actually this was a Chinese job. This wasn't just Bin Laden. This was Bin Laden plus Beijing. But Blair and Bush were so afraid when they discovered this, they decided not to confront China and not to release this evidence to the world. They decided this is too dangerous because it'll mean World War III. If we announce that it's been proved China did this and helped Bin Laden and his merry gang, well then the people will demand we go to war with China. Obviously they would have done. Well, China has nuclear weapons and a vast army, and that would have been World War III. It still could be. And that's, the hypothesis says, that's why it's been suppressed all these years. There was a decision taken by British American intelligence, probably, in discussions with the Chinese, and it was probably agreed, look, I tell you what, we won't go public with this, we won't launch World War III. And I tell you what, you can clear away the debris of the damn thing you did. So that's why all the stuff ended up in China. Discuss. This is a hypothesis, right? My view is that if it's true, the Historical Commission, we need to find out. That's our job. And I suspend judgment. Another possibility, and which I discuss, is that Israel had some kind of role in this, and there is some evidence that they might. People like Christopher Berlin have written extensive reasons why Israel was involved, pointing out that Silverstein was a dual Israeli-American citizen, and a lot of the people involved, strangely enough, in the Bush cabinet were all dual Israeli-American citizens and had been vociferous Zionist supporters for many years, and that the whole event, the way it was spun, influenced and helped the extreme Zionist right-wing cause in Israel, which they relied with. Not what I call the authentic Zionists of the old school, the kind of Labour Zionists, the people that actually wanted a peace deal with Palestine. No, this is the Likud Zionists who wanted war in perpetuity against the Arabs. Well, this whole scenario fits their agenda brilliantly. And it's caused war continuously ever since. And the taking down of Saddam Hussein, which spun off from it, again, that was an agenda here. He was quite anti-Zionist, Saddam. He was pro-Palestinian. He wanted a peace. So he was taken down. That's this hypothesis. And again, I look at the evidence for and against. I then look at the evidence of, was Saudi Arabia involved? This is sometimes called the quadrilateral hypothesis as well, that Saudi Arabia, Israel, and America were all involved in a sort of inner plot. there's some evidence. I mean, there's quite a lot of evidence that Saudi Arabia was involved because, as I say, its embassy in Washington was giving money to the people, and all its Saudi nationals were allowed to be flown out of America the day after 9/11, including Bin Laden members of his family. And there's been obstruction of, following these trails pretty much ever since. So the kind of Wahhabi-led ideology of Saudi Arabian, rulers, I think technically as a Muslim, there's no way they should have got involved in anything like this. This is illegal, it's against international law, it's criminal, it's against Islam. There's no way they should have killed innocent civilians and so on. But then I think we're dealing in Saudi Arabia with, say, the latest guy on the block, this Crown Prince Salman, who connives at murdering and cutting up journalists, Khashoggi. Now, Khashoggi knew Bin Laden and was quite chummy with him. I'd love it if Khashoggi had lived to give evidence. Was he killed because he knew something about the thinness of the Saudi claim to morality? Discuss. So again, it seems to me that Saudi Arabian entanglement in this is a hypothesis worth following. I look at the possibility of Russian involvement in the book because I'm being, broad-minded and I'm being a Herodotus figure. Would Russia have got involved in this? Putin? Well, they they don't like Muslims. They fought them in Afghanistan. That started the whole thing going. If Russia had discovered that these crazy people were going to attack New York, would they have got involved in pre-wiring the buildings? I think I say it's unlikely. Would some Russian sort of mafia types have been involved? It's possible, but again, I think probably unlikely. Then I talk about other hypotheses. I'm not going to run through them all. I've got about halfway. It's interesting. And I'm trained as a historian at the highest level to generate these kind of hypotheses. Read the book, We're going to be going into all these in the commission. And every single one of these hypotheses has to be gone through with a fine-tooth comb. And we have to look at all the evidence. Then I come to part 5 of the book, which is called The Moral and Philosophical Responsibilities Arising from Our Historical Inquiries. So now I'm sort of zooming out into a bigger picture, and I'm no longer talking about the micro detail of historical studies. This is the so what. Well, the philosophy is dealing with the so what. So I talk about the moral and philosophical issues rising from 9/11. They're huge. They're huge. That was the day on which the entire narrative of world history. You see, when I began this talk, I was saying how we thought peace was coming. It was a rational world. There was a sense of growing integrity in politics. Tony Blair was in the early youth of his governance. There was the Good Friday Agreement in Ireland, which I had a little role in. And gradually we thought we could solve the conflicts around the planet. And suddenly this happened. And it set everything back to a stone age of mistrust, paranoia, and catastrophic mendacity. Whoever planned this got away with the biggest coup of, possibly all of world history. I can't think of anything this big equivalent in all of the history I've studied. And they're still getting away with it. This is the point. And what we've seen is an increasing mendacity among politicians. So now the latest one, if you let them get away with one lie, they think up other lies, and then they do others and others. Well, now the latest one is Brexit. It's a monstrous lie. It's Britain's 9/11. We're watching the buildings crashing in slow motion, and nobody's speaking the truth apart from the core group of Remainers like me who are speaking the truth, but we're marginalised by the media, we're silenced by the newspapers and the BBC, and we've been 9/11, to use it as a verb. So the moral and philosophical issues arising are enormous. It put an end to genuine peace discussions in the Middle East. Palestinian people are a million miles away from a peace settlement with Israel. And then I talk about, the other consequences. I'm not going to summarise the whole thing. Now this is volume 1, right? I end up by talking about truth as the path to peace. That remains my, ontological position as a philosopher, because I run philosophers of peace as well as historians of peace. So that's a huge work. I wanted to share it with you because it was a labour of love, and it's a craft of considerable precision. It took me, as I say, over a year. And that's only volume 1. Volume 2, which was equally as long, was a region by region, country by country analysis of what happened after 9/11. Who was in power at the time, who was president, and what did they do? How did they respond? That was very interesting to research. And again, I was looking for signs of who was jumping up and down saying, what a great thing, we're so glad 9/11 happened. Those Americans deserved that type of attitude. Or, that was a terrible thing, we commiserate with you, that was horrible. And it's a very interesting study. Okay, so that's what I wanted to share. And so as a result of all that research, I'm in touch with investigators, researchers, historians. I'm inviting people to come and join this online Zoom conference, which we're launching this year in a few days' time. Anyone listening to this talk can apply to join. There's a limit, obviously, to Zoom people, but if you email me in time, you might get on. I'm only going to be taking evidence from people that actually have some material evidence to present. And the people on the actual commission will only be trained historians. So it's the beginning of a work I'm announcing. It's 19 years since it happened, and I can't really believe that nobody else has done this. Why is it, that there isn't already a flourishing historical commission of inquiry into 9/11? Well, that's a question, that puzzles me. And I'm going to set it right, because we historians have a duty to uphold the integrity of the profession. And this is a very, very big issue. So, anyway, there we are. I'm going to finish there. I hope that, you find this of interest, and I'm really doing it on behalf of humanity, because the millions of people on this planet that want a better life, that don't want the insecurity and the poverty and the homelessness that come from war and turbulence, in many Middle East countries in particular. The justification that's always given is, yes, but we need to spend all this money because of Islamic terrorism. Well, what if that Islamic terrorism was a sort of fake creation by Western intelligence for its own purposes? We know that it was in Afghanistan. Well, what if that was then extended and the whole thing was a sort of fake creation? Well, I suspend judgment, but I'm going to find out the truth, and I hope that you'll be part of that quest. I want to finish by just reading one little verse. Some of you know I'm also doing a commentary on the Quran. As a scholar of religions, with another hat on, I'm an expert in comparative religion. And I've been working through commentaries on the world's sacred scriptures. I've done the 4 Gospels, the 2 Gnostic Gospels, the books of Enoch, Ketuvim I'm working through, and then I've done the Quran, which is nearly finishing. And what's interesting is that I'm launching this historical commission pretty much at the same time as finishing my commentary on the Quran. And so it's in the studies of the Quran, which I've been making. I've been working on the last surahs in Medina, which are fairly short and very interesting surahs. And I've been sharing, my discoveries. They're on the Global Green University website. But one of the surahs admonishes, they're all trying to find a way to bring Muslims into a place of morality. And Muhammad's channeling of the Quran is angled against all those who spread lies and disinformation, all those who spread falsity. They're upholding constantly the duty on Muslims of being truth lovers and truth speakers. And constantly saying that those that spread lies, are in the end not going to prosper. It's only those who, deal kindly and justly who are the true believers. So that's been really interesting to compare and contrast, the Quranic duties of what it is to be a Muslim with the alleged, crimes that these so-called Muslim terrorists are supposed to have committed. And I see such a mismatch that it looks to me that no genuine Muslim who'd ever read his Quran or her Quran could have possibly been involved with such an un-Islamic attack as happened on 9/11. So, read the Quran and you'll see what I mean. And listen to my commentary on it, which is the most comprehensive philosophical commentary done by a Western academic that I know of. And it's taken me 7 years to do. Why? Because I feel as an intellectual, I have a duty to try and get at the truth behind events. And I think the Quran is an amazing book. It's an extraordinary book which deserves to be known and loved, whether you're a Muslim or not. And I've tried to bring out the hermeneutic of peace. I've commented on the Quran as a peace scholar, finding there the passages that make sense. I'm just going to finish by reading one short section. This is from a famous surah called Tagabun, Mutual Loss and Gain. Whatever is in the heavens and on earth doth declare the praises and glory of God. To him belongs dominion, and to him belongs praise, and he has power over all things. It is he who has created you, and of you are some that are unbelievers, and some that are believers. And God sees well all that you do. He has created the heavens and the earth in just proportions, and has given you shape, and made your shapes beautiful. And to him is the final goal.